Welcome back to Proudly Made in Africa. Your host, Raj Mavrik, and today we're honored to have an inspiring guest with us, Cathy Coughlan. She is the CEO of Down to Basics, known as the TOBA, a network supporting immigrant entrepreneurs. And originally she's from Kenya and now based in Ireland. Cathy has dedicated herself to fostering innovation and empowering immigrant business owners to overcome barriers and achieve their dreams. Successful businesses are not easy, especially in Ireland, for immigrants coming from Africa. So today we'll be diving into her incredible journey from Kenya to Ireland, her experiences as an immigrant entrepreneur, and the transformative role of networks like Datoba in creating opportunities and driving policy change. Cathy, welcome to the podcast. So we have always taken advantage of technologies that have been available, even more than those who maybe had created some of them. So I've seen that trend, and I'm very confident that regardless of if many people will be removed from the labor force due to the automation of AI in these different industries, the general community would still feel a positive impact. That is one thing I feel will happen. So regardless of if it's in Mombasa or Lagos, the youth that will take advantage in creating something positive out of it will be able to give back to those societies and empower people. We have the story of a Silicon Valley happening in Africa, in two countries in Africa, actually. So this is happening, and I do believe it will have that positive change. But still, I do appreciate the insights and how deep you went into it. Thinking about how maybe Africans are concerned about technology or how the future is looking for us. I'm just saying, do you see like the way we are today, with borrowed administration in terms of politics? Let's think about, because what you said basically means that our organic development, when we're coming up with our community, was disrupted completely. And that's why we're suffering today. Do you think we can keep using these systems in the way we're using them to get to a point where we have grown into them and we now understand how to get the best out of them? Or do we need to find a way to adapt our own style of administration in this political system to be able to help us get back on top?
I think we are very adaptable, yes. However, we also need to not lie to ourselves that borrowing everything 100% is really going to help us. It hasn't helped us because the narrative that's out there is that Africans can't do much for themselves. Africans we really have nothing to show for ourselves. We have more aid in our continent than we have trade. The companies that come there are more NGO related to aid as opposed to trade. The image of Africa is one of disease and poverty, and basically it's a very bleak narrative. We kind of almost, need to be saved from ourselves. That is the narrative. So yes, we can say we will be very adaptable, but you can accommodate something for so long until you lose yourself. So we have to go back just a little bit and look at what was there before, and did it work? If it worked, what is there now that is good for our communities? What is working in terms of trade? Take the good bits from what we have and then bring in our own and merge everything together. Because even in borrowed situations, it's surely not so bad, because in Kenya, we are all alive, we are resilient, we are working, we are surviving. Nigeria, the same. Ghana, the same. Tanzania, the same. Uganda, the same. Malawi, the same. Zambia, the same. So surely there must be something good in this borrowed institutions or borrowed administration. So let's identify what is good, but we also need to go back and see what was working for us, perhaps bring it into our business model, and that will work because it has worked in different aspects. So it's just a matter of tweaking it. And if we're so adaptable and we've lived abroad for so many years, surely it's not very difficult tweaking businesses and making them work for us. That's in fact an easier ask than asking somebody to move from here and go back home.
Yeah, or start a political system from fresh. Imagine saying we should scrap it. It's similar to a story of one's life, you know. You wake up, they say every adult, you know, has a traumatic past. And what's the question? Do you say you're hopeless because you have all this traumatic effect that has created wounds in you, or you learn how to, you know, heal, but also what lessons can you learn? Because many people say their trauma made them, for instance, you know, but when you ask someone with deep insight, they'll say, I wouldn't choose to have those traumatic experiences if I could go back, but I don't regret where I am today due to them. So it's similar. You have to look. I really appreciate that insight because it's just you can take that and apply it to many aspects of life. Take what we have that is good right now and look at what has been good before and merge it to make something more unique for ourselves. Because there are many countries not like African countries today, so we do have a unique opportunity.
You see, we are very diverse. And sometimes I think we look at our diversity and think of each other as the other. So it's more of look at them, you know, they're like this and they do things differently. But that is an opportunity, working with other people. Borrow from them. We need to look at how did the Benin, how is it that they were so strong in trade?
Yeah.
You know, how is it that countries like Somali and Ethiopia were so good in trade? You know, because there were perhaps some of them were in the Ottoman Empire. So their trade, they're very, like Somalis are. It's a very interesting case study. But if you look at the Somali diaspora, like if you look at the Somali who have moved to Kenya because of maybe war or anything, they are fantastic in trade. Like really, they are commendable. You look at them and you almost envy them. You're like, I can't believe how far you guys have come. It's just,
Wow.
you know, and it's the same if you look at Europe and you look at the Somali business community. It's remarkable, and they really work together. They work together, they pull their funds together, and they pull it off. They really do. They just don't go. They're very consistent, and they do what they have to do. So we just have to borrow from each other. We stop looking at they look like this, that's the way they do things. Just borrow each other in terms of what are their strengths, what can I borrow from them that I can bring in here, that can work for us, you know. That's what I think anyway.
Beautiful. We have a tradition though where you just tell us what you imagine for a brighter Africa in the next future. So let's say 10 years.
Oh, 10 years is a very short time.
Yeah.
I'm here over 2 years, 20 years, sorry, over 2 decades. So 10 years, blink, and it's 20, 30 years, you know. But there's so much more that I'd love for Africa. I really do. What I know is I think we need to learn from each other, because I think we forget how big and vast Africa is. Like if you put so many countries and continents in Africa, they can perfectly fit and there's still so much space. So we are so many of us, we are so diverse, and we are so unique in every aspect. But we don't learn from each other. We really don't. And I'll just take up one example. Even here in the African diaspora, if you had to tell me 5 things about different African people that you know about, I don't know if many of us have that kind of knowledge. We don't take the time to actually know each other. We just assume we know. So if somebody says I'm from Ghana, I'm like, yeah, that's good. Yeah. Nkuruma, yeah. Oh, good. That's it. That's the end of a conversation, you know? If we learn more about each other, genuinely, we open our minds and we learn. We agree to learn. We will learn a different way of doing things and approaching things. And if we can learn that in the diaspora, there is hope that we can actually do that on the ground. African Union, I have a lot of hope for African Union. There are a lot of things that could help when it comes to borders, when it comes to, it's very difficult for me to travel, for example, from Kenya to Cameroon. The level of scrutiny, the border controls, the questions, and chances I might not even be let in.
Yes.
But somebody from Australia can fly to Kenya, somebody from Australia can fly to Canada, to Cameroon, and chances are they might not even need a visa. But I need a visa to go to Cameroon.
Why do you think that is though?
Because you see, through colonialism, when borders were created and ports were created, whether it's airport or, whatever ports were created, they were created to divide. Of course, the borders were there to divide. You divide a region and these are the people there and these are the people here. And then there is a competition between whether it's the French or the Germans. Yeah, we are getting these are the resources. And so they already had their own competition in terms of where they were getting. So if England was getting so much from Tanzania, then they wanted to get more from Kenya, they wanted more from Zambia, they wanted more from Nigeria. And then the French could see, oh God, the English are doing so well, let's go and invade another one and add to our portfolio and invade. So that whole notion of borders is still there. Now, borders clearly divide. That's the job of a border. A border's job is to divide. So the fact that we are divided, we've been left with that legacy. And there is something called the pedagogy of the oppressed, where it states the oppressed becomes the oppressor, And if you look at colonial masters, for example, in slavery, those African Americans who then became free and they moved to other regions, they oppressed other African Americans because they felt that, okay, what the master did, now I've taken that place, so it feels nice if I oppress other people. It's instilled in you in terms of some sort of inferiority complex. So when we inherited the legacy of division, we saying now those Cameroonians, those Nigerians, those Somalis, those other people will obviously not come to us because they are the others, And because of that, then we created a system where we can definitely divide ourselves. And when Europe had the systems, or America had the systems where they have visa control, again, we have borrowed everything. We borrow everything. So when we borrow, it means the more stringent and more strict we are if we see somebody else who's African, it's because we have been oppressed, and we feel to gain power is to oppress the other. That is how we feel we are more powerful. If I can oppress him and ask him to go back home, then I'm more powerful than they are. So that is the legacy that we've been left for. We have been oppressed, therefore we have become oppressive to each other. But if we learn how to stop oppressing, to open borders, to remove those tariffs of trade, then we will go a long way into holding conversations, trading together, adapting languages that can work for us. For example, Western Africa, by now, to be honest, even Pidgin English should be a language that when I'm coming to West Africa, a majority of people can speak it. It should not be an informal language. It should be a language in the mainstream, where that's a language people need to learn. If you want to go to Western African countries, they speak Pidgin English, you need to learn it, or you need to learn some certain terms. If you come to Eastern Africa and Central African region, you need to know maybe some Swahili terms. That gives you pride, it gives you identity. But unless we can learn to do that ourselves, it's going to be very difficult to move then to another. We'll always see other people's things better and we'll always borrow them. Yet the answer is within ourselves.
Speaking about these border controls and oppression, I've heard or I've read that Ethiopia seems to be one of the countries with the highest amount of visa refusals to other Africans. Do you have any idea why that is though? Does Ethiopia seem to be different in perception to other Africans?
Ethiopia was actually never colonized.
Yes, I heard that.
In a sense, Ethiopia is pure, if I could use that word, in the sense that it's not corrupt with all of this madness of we borrow this, we bring the other, they were never colonized.
But they still have the same corrupt situation. So I mean, like, in terms of their democracy, it's still not good, or their society, or is it different though? I don't really know too much about Ethiopia. No, not the culture. Yeah, the culture is rich, but in terms of the
they live their culture. So if you look at their dressing, if you look at the food, if you look at they still promote the culture, they promote the language, they promote and other African people really have been if I can use some terms, we've been polluted. So when we come to those countries, we think they're backward. We think they are not civilized enough. And the government shields that. There has been instances where South African countries or people have gone to work there where they feel, those people are very backward in every sense, but they are not. They are very powerful people. They come from a very strong, they come out from a very strong heritage, and their customs are very, very strong. So it's not just Africans who actually don't get visas easily. Other people don't get visas easily either, and it's because they also don't want to be corrupt, if I could say that, But they are very good trade partners. So they're next to Kenya. So they're very good trade partners. But they also don't like to be oppressed. They don't like to be told, do this, do the other. Maybe if you can do this way. They are very proud of their culture. They are a very, very proud people. They're the ones who introduced coffee to the world.
Yes. The home of coffee.
The way they drink their coffee, because, so much influence of their coffee is in Kenya. It's amazing. Like that level of coffee, that coffee is not even here. So when I go, especially to the coast region, that's where you'll see the influences of how coffee tastes different. The spices they put in the coffee, it tastes very different. So basically, it's not a corrupt country. Sorry, not corrupt, sorry. It's an untouched country when it comes to the Western world. And they also want to live it that way. So perhaps maybe that pride makes them feel
push. Okay, that makes sense. But what I wanted to actually mention earlier was, even though yet not polluted, their political system still seems not efficient. I've had a lot of people complain about the corruption, or even Addis Ababa hasn't gone to the levels that the people wanted to go to. So now that's like a good case study for me to argue a system that wasn't corrupted by colonialism against others. So what do you think is the basis for those reasons? Why is it that a political system that hasn't been corrupted still hasn't gotten to such a great height?
Ethiopia is one of the fewest countries in the world that many Western countries, it's not just Western countries, many foreign countries want to deal with when it comes to investment. Ethiopia, Vietnam, those are one of the top countries when it comes to countries that people want to work with. Those with investments, or those who want to, like the IMF and the World Bank, because Ethiopia have mastered the art of negotiation. They sit down on the table and they say, look, we are not budging on this. If you give us money, because you see all the money that comes, or whether, when it comes to investment or loans, especially from IMF, it comes with terms and conditions. Other African countries are just happy to allow any terms and conditions imposed on them without speaking. Ethiopians sit down and they say, we will take, for example, 10 million US dollars. And Americans will say, look, we can only give you $10 million only if you empower and promote issues around, for example, LGBTQ, or perhaps you can have programs on HIV, or you could have programs on child nutrition or child mortality. And they say, we don't have issues of LGBTQ. That's not an issue in our country. We don't have HIV issues. We have ways around working around that. And when it comes to child mortality, we have ways of that. We're looking for this money to expand our agriculture systems. And we are also looking for solar systems and wind renewable energy. So are you giving us the 10 million or you're not, so that we can look for somebody else? And they do not, they're not bullied into taking money so that they can start bringing programs of I don't know what. They're not. And when you do give them that 10 million, they use it on agriculture. They use it on infrastructure or energy or whatever it is they say they're working on. That's what they use it on. They negotiate and they say, we are not doing those programs you're asking us to do. They are certainly not a priority in our country. We do what we have to do. And the reason why it might look slow to you, or, they are very strategic. They work with the community and identify what needs to be done according to the community, not what the outside world needs them to look like. If you want the trains and the roads to be fantastic, That's your overview ideology. But their farmers are growing crops. They're able to trade with each other. They're opening regions. When it comes to trade, their own interclan trade is opening because they're able to boost productivity. They're able to have renewable, efficient, sustainable energies. If you look at their rural areas, so their capital might not be looking so fancy like Nairobi or Lagos or Abuja or Dar es Salaam. But if you go to their rural areas, if you look at other regions where they actually put their money when it's given to them by World Bank, it is where the direct needs of the people are: food, health, education, and things like that. By the time they get to where you think they need to be, infrastructure and trains and all of this, you will be amazed, because it will now completely open up the whole country to another level.
Interesting.
They have worked their way way from the bottom. We are busy running around like hamsters.
I get you.
By the time they get to a level, we will be trying to get to there. We'll be thinking, and these are people who got money in terms of aid, but because there was a problem many years ago. Yes, they're way ahead, and they're usually way ahead because they look into their culture, they look at their way of life, their heritage, and their customs. And when it comes to corruption, I'll be very honest. My personal opinion on corruption is very, what can I say, controversial.
Okay, let's go.
I have had Nigeria is one of the most corrupt countries in the world. I've had this, so like you've mentioned, Ethiopia is very corrupt when it comes to politics. Somebody has said Kenyans are very corrupt, when it comes to governance, when it comes to. But let us just quickly look at just even slightly corruption. Corruption is not a word that is coined in any African language. You tell me if your language there is a word called in corruption. Translate it.
I don't know.
Yeah, because there's none. It is a new concept. If you're told for so long that you're black, you will be black. We are black. Identify, show me, tell me who exactly is black in your eyes. Who is the color of your t-shirt right now?
We know that we're all shades of wheat.
Exactly. So in that sense, there is really no corruption. Our societies are fundamentally based on whatever the discourse is on corruption. And corruption essentially could mean, for example, you're corrupt if you're a civil servant and you're given, for example, a bribe to do something. It means you're corrupt, right? That is the essence of corruption.
Yes. Money laundering.
Yes, in my culture, if you go to somebody's house, you go with things. I cannot go, even here in Ireland, I cannot go to somebody's house unless first I go and buy things. I can't just go empty-handed. I have to go buy shopping, buy this, and then show up. And chances are when I'm leaving, if they've cooked, they'll give me things to bring home with me. If you go to somebody's house and you say, look, you've come with stuff. If you're holding a conversation with somebody and you've taken a lot of stuff and you talk about a lot of things, business, life, it's cold, there was a storm, I don't know my car, the driveway, children, God knows what, have you been at home? What happened at home? How did you come? All this. Chances are somebody might say, oh, I'm having a problem. My brother doesn't have a job. Look, let him call this person, Yeah, there's this person who helped me. Why don't you ask him to call this? Now, does it mean I'm corrupt? Or this person who's actually helping me is corrupt? Because I did take things to their house. So we have our culture allows us to take things to the chief. You can't go to the chief without taking bananas, for example. In the rural area, I'll go to the chief, I'll take bananas and I'll say, look, chief, the way my mother is having issues, please look after her while I'm away. It doesn't mean that's corruption. It just means that's what we do in a community. If you're empty-handed, you can come and say, sorry, I didn't come with anything, but really I have this problem, because that's just the way we are culturally. If somebody else comes from outside, it looks like I went with the bananas to the chief so that the chief can do something for me, yet he's being paid for his role. That is really not the essence. And if somebody comes from outside to tell me how bad, the structures are for me on the ground, essentially, they will say that I'm corrupt, my systems are corrupt. And it will be coined that, oh, if you go to Kenya, they're corrupt. If I see the police officer and I say, we don't need to go to court, let's sit down. And then they'll ask me, where are you from, Cathy? Ah, that's where you're from. I know your auntie. I know. Now, listen, the way you're driving, it's not good. Change this. Now, does it mean he's corrupt? No. It just means he's given me my warning, but based on the fact that he knows my aunt, he feels that he might advise me on better ways of driving and better ways of. Now, we've moved to another level where now governments can be given money from abroad. And when they squander it, like I explained to you, they don't see money for so long, and then you just give them loads of money, then they are called corrupt. So corrupt is a very much Western coined term. It does not belong to our culture. Our culture will never change when it comes to giving gifts to people, not because we want them to do favors. It's just because it kind of softens the tone to present your problem. It feels very difficult presenting a problem when you haven't brought something. You look like you're asking somebody to give you and you've not given back. So it gives you a level playing field. When you take bananas and you tell the chief to help you, yes, it's their job and they're paid for it. But we come from a different society. So no, yes, we are corrupt, and no, we are not corrupt. Yes, we are corrupt because that's what we've been made to feel. That's what we've been told over the years. But certainly, no, we are not corrupt. If you give the Irish government $1 billion without any indication of any, chances are they might do exactly the same as we do. Are they corrupt? Yes, they are corrupt. Do they take gifts? Perhaps they do. Yes, they are corrupt. That's their own terminology. We are not, because really that's the way we work. We go to people's houses, we go to people's offices with things. That's just the way we are.
So in that sense, can one argue that because before, let's say, the colonialism could take advantage of us, they had to learn about our culture, anthropologists and all. So understanding that was an aspect of, I give you something, and when I ask you for something, it's almost expected of you to reciprocate. Mm-hmm. Do you think maybe that was taken advantage of,
Absolutely.
In the sense of?
Absolutely. Not only taken advantage of, that ideology that we are corrupt people without understanding the elements of our culture, it's actually very racist. It is. If you don't take time to understand people's cultures, and then you start defining them with your own eyes, how you feel it's happening, yet it's actually not what's happening on the ground. It's very dangerous. So if you look, for example, at the Orient is the way the Middle Eastern people were looked at by the Western people, by the Caucasian, by the white people. The initial pictures that they gave were women who were dressed scantily, belly dancing. That is what the Orient looked like. It looked more or less like they have harems. But if you look today, those women are decent women. They are well covered up. They are religious women. They are women rooted to their family, women who, so maybe they did arrive and they did find a harem somewhere. Yes. But does that describe all the Middle Eastern people? No. So if you look at the Orient, it comes with connotations of racism, and it's been known, oh God, those people, the sheikhs, the this, that's the way they are. The whole, you go in there, you're given a bit of wine, there's a bit of belly dancing, women are there. Really, if you go to the Middle East, that's not what it's about. There's a lot more culture. There's a lot more trade going on. People sit down, they talk about business. Look at Dubai, look at Saudi Arabia, look at, those countries have really emerged. Because when you look at the perspective of what the Westerners thought of them, it's different. So when you start saying Africans are corrupt, you will sell the idea and it will have legs, it will run, we eventually will always be corrupt. But I will never stop going to people's houses or the chief's office with bananas and asking for favors, because that's just the way the culture is.
Interesting. So actually, you made very good points, because it's similar to someone who, let's say an entrepreneur who starts to work on themselves. It almost feels lonely when they're working on themselves, because they don't know where the end of their journey will come. And maybe their friends are no longer with the same mindset. So sometimes they don't see where they're going, because it goes back to the whole Ethiopian experience. There are Ethiopians right now that sound very dissatisfied, about what's going on. And I think maybe they compare themselves with what's happening in Nairobi, what's happening in Nigeria. and they are not seeing the bigger picture that our government is putting in place for them. When you compare Dubai 50 years ago, I'm pretty sure the narrative that the Westerners were putting on them was, very downtrodden. And then today, Dubai changed their narrative. They didn't wait for that narrative to be changed for them. They changed their narrative. Now, the Westerners can't say this is who they are, and anyone will believe, because they see the place as a destination that they want to go visit themselves. So I really like you sharing that insight, to be honest. And anyone listening, if you're from Ethiopia or you're going there, at least you know that the government has a very good plan in place. So it comes down now to it. Should other African countries be looking at what's happening in Ethiopia and trying to, pick out some of those good from there to adopt in their own society as well? Because, like you say, it's untainted.
I think we need to learn from each other. And not only necessarily Ethiopia, but even within our own countries, there are politicians, there are leaders who are trying to do some good. There are. And those are the people we need to look at. The communities that are doing good things. We need to identify those good things and perhaps tweak whatever it is we are doing to what they are doing, to bring that in, kind of adopt that. Because Ethiopia might work very well there, because perhaps maybe agriculture might be the biggest, that is what suits them at the moment, or culture or their heritage is more important. It might not necessarily suit somebody who is in Lesotho or Swaziland. They don't perhaps have that land. It might be very dry. It might be, but how does that trickle down? How do other people use that land? What do they normally do for other things? So we need to borrow from good leaders, good citizens, and borrow that ideology. Look at other dry regions. What are they doing? What can we do in our country? Look at diaspora. You see, the huge influence of diaspora is remittances. We are remitting so much money in our countries, but what impact is it actually happening? Is the money trickling down to the community? Probably not. If you send money to your friend or family, it's just for them. So it's not necessarily for the community. We need to come up with incentives where we are building institutions that we can actually say, this is what we are doing. So, for example, there is diaspora grouping in America. I'm not sure what country, I might be wrong, so I'd rather not mention it. But I know there is a group in America that has brought together African diaspora, where they pool their funds, and the funds are used to set up industries in Africa. So if they're setting up industries, they already have partnered with the government and private institutions on the ground. So when they create manufacturing farms, people in those communities work. These people send less money at home, because now they have their own sustainability in terms of income. We can also borrow from them. We in the diaspora, we need to rewrite our history. We need to we need to change the narrative ourselves. We need to create tables, build tables, and sit on those tables. If we're not invited to tables, we need to build tables and sit on them, and bring some sort of positive change when it comes to Africa. Nobody's going to change that narrative because it suits them. It comes with power and dominance. So we are the ones who have to change that narrative. It doesn't matter whether you're on the ground or whether you're here. We have to essentially change that narrative. We need to look at each other not as competitive, like it's competition. We need to help each other. And it takes a lot to look at other people and think, no, I'm not going to tell them what my problems are, because, I know if I tell them, they'll probably steal my idea, or they'll do that and do that. And they might. But we need to look at each other, even as Africans, as friends. We need to look at each other as brothers and sisters. We need to work together, because the Ubuntu ideology is very much alive and well, but we really need to remove all these small squabbles and look at the bigger picture,
Yes, I do agree with you. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. To be honest, very, very inspiring. And, it has given me homework of what to go learn more about. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much for giving me the space to share to talk about what I'm passionate about, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely a pleasure. Thank you. And to everyone that tuned in, stay curious. I'll see you guys on the next episode.